What exactly is your job? What do you do every day?
Well, that's a good question. Actually, I'm curious to ask you what you think I do.
So you're a curator.
Yes. And do you know where I work?
The BMFA, right?
Right.
Modern art?
Yeah, modern and contemporary. Yeah.
I think, in my mind, I think someone who has like all this art in front of them and they pick which ones to show.
Yeah.
But is that basically?
That's part of it. Yeah. What were you gonna say?
Yeah, like doing the logistics behind like getting artists to like show their work in the BMFAs.
Yeah. And what have you seen there recently?
We saw the tobacco, or I saw the tobacco project.
Right. Did you get a chance to see that?
I have not.
No. Okay, it's gone now. But
And then the
good.
whale.
You've seen the whale. Have you seen the whale?
No.
Oh, you have to see the
been in a
whale.
while, yeah.
Okay, well go see that because that closes January 29th, and you don't want to miss that.
Okay.
Okay, good. Well, basically what I do is, or the way I think about it is my work is divided between working with exhibitions, special exhibitions, and the permanent collection. And the permanent collection means all kinds of things. So I actually buy art for the museum, and I figure out what goes on view and how it goes on view. I do the layouts and the arrangements of it. I write about it. I write the labels. Have you ever looked at any of the labels?
Yeah.
And you know how they have artist quotes and then they have a little statement about the work.
Yeah.
So those are the things that I write and research the quotes. And I give lectures and I write in other ways. And so that's the permanent collection, basically. I'm building the permanent collection and I'm using the permanent collection and putting that work on view in the galleries. And then special exhibitions might come from the permanent collection, but just as often they might be work that we borrow from other museums or from artists or from collectors. And for instance, the tobacco show was either work that was already made and that the artist still owned, or that he made for the exhibition, brand new work.
Oh, cool.
And we didn't own any of that. And then the whale is actually something that we borrowed from collectors in Philadelphia. But did you happen to see some of the other little objects around that had to do with whaling in the sea? Like there was a little whale oil lamp that's only about this tall, and it's very, it's just a very subtle, kind of humble object. Well, if you go back, when you go back, you'll see this huge sculpture, and then there are just 6 objects all around it if you walk around the whole whale. And those are from our collection, and I wanted to create a dialogue between the whale and things in our collection that had to do with whaling in the sea. But none of those objects were contemporary, so I borrowed them from other departments. But yeah, that kind of sums it up, that it's the permanent collection and that it's special exhibitions. But there's a lot else that goes into it also.
Did you have anything to do with the Picasso exhibit?
I did, yeah.
How did you guys come to get that in Richmond?
Well, all that work came from one museum, from the Picasso Museum in Paris. And the Picasso Museum is closed for renovations, and so they're traveling their collection. And partly it's a way to just share it with a broad public, and partly they're raising a lot of money for their renovation because they charge museums a fee to take the show. And the San Francisco Museum of Art was scheduled to take it, and the Seattle Art Museum, and our director found out about it, and a spot opened up because a museum in New York pulled out. And so we just jumped on it really quickly. We knew it would be popular and important, and we were the only museum in the East Coast to take it. And also we had this new building, and we wanted to show people, why we built a new building. So in that case, all the work was already selected for the show by the director of the Picasso Museum. The catalog was written, and she even traveled with the show and installed it at every museum.
Oh, wow.
And those are the things that I would usually do. I would select the work, and I would write about it, I would install it, figure out where things go. but in this case, she did all of that, but I still actually had a lot to do. So I was the in-house curator, and what did I do? I rewrote a lot of their texts for the labels and the brochure so that it would work better for our audience. I gave a lot of tours. I gave some talks, things like that. Yeah.
So how much freedom does the museum give you with setting up different shows and stuff? Because you said with the whale, and you're thinking about how the other pieces would complement the whale. So
Mm-hmm.
do they give you certain guidelines for choosing those things out?
Well, that's a good question. There's a whole process for exhibitions. If I want to do something, I have to propose it to the head of the exhibition department, and it has to get kind of talked through about whether it's a valuable enough project to devote our time and energy and finite money to, and then the director needs to approve it, and so there's a lot of levels. So there's that process, but I've been pretty lucky and haven't had a lot of things handed to me. I mean, the Picasso show was handed to me, that was a good project.
Yeah.
And mostly I've been able to come up with my own projects and then convince people that they're a good idea, and they've gone along with it. That varies for curators and from museum to museum. You can be some places and just have a lot of things kind of assigned to you, or you could have much more freedom.
Mm-hmm.
But I have a good amount of freedom if I can, after I've convinced people that it's a good idea, that it will work for the museum. Oh, we're gonna get that noise for a little while. It's making ice.
Have you always worked at the BMFA, or have you worked at galleries or other museums?
I've only worked at museums my
Okay.
entire career, but I've worked at 3 museums. So I first worked at a museum in Hartford, Connecticut,
Mm-hmm.
called the Wadsworth Atheneum, and then I went to grad school. So that was after college. I worked at that museum for 3 years, and then I went to graduate school in New York, and then I worked at the Philadelphia Museum of Art for 7 years, and then I came here, and I've been here for 13 years.
How do you become a curator? Did you go to art school, or?
The most common way is to go to graduate school and study art history.
Okay.
And the second most common way, and this is really much more for contemporary curators than in any other area, the second most common way is to go to graduate school but to study museum studies or curatorial studies. And that's becoming a little more popular, but still the kind of academic route of studying art history is the most common route, and getting a master's or preferably a PhD.
Mm-hmm.
So since you've been around art, I guess, for so much of your life, do you have a favorite artist? Or?
That's always the hardest question for me. I don't have one favorite artist. I don't know why that is, but I like a lot of different artists, and I like, there's artists who I've worked with and done exhibitions or bought work, and I like all of them.
Yeah.
I have artists who in some ways are maybe influential. Like when I started working in Hartford,
Mm-hmm.
and I was 21 maybe, or 22, just out of college, there was an artist named Sol DeWitt, who, I don't know if you've heard of him or not, but do you know at the museum in the Marble Hall, the Marble Hall, the big area has red marble on the floor and the walls?
In the BMF?
Yeah.
I think so.
And there's this big wall drawing that it's like a big mural, and it has 4 colorful cubes. It fills the entire 4 walls there. If you were standing there, you'd know exactly what I'm talking
Mm-hmm.
about. And also, do you know when you come into the atrium of the museum, in the new building now, in the atrium, there's this huge
Yeah.
colorful sculpture that looks like stalagmites or melted crayons
Yeah, I know
or
what you're
something.
talking about.
Okay, so that's a very late work by this artist, Sol DeWitt, and the other piece I was describing is kind of mid-career work. But when I started in Hartford, I was actually working with a collection of art that he had put together of all of his friends. And it was a certain type of work from the 1960s and 70s. And that was very influential for me. You know, that's how I kind of got my start. So I still think of him as one of my favorite and, you know, most important artists. Yeah.
Is that how you chose to work with contemporary or modern art, or did you choose to work with contemporary
I did
art?
choose, but yeah. I mean, I had some good experiences starting in college. I was an art history major, and I got to organize an exhibition with a group of students from that same collection that I went on to work with at that museum, because I went to college just 20 minutes down the road from that museum. And that was such an interesting experience that then I was an intern at the museum, and then they asked me to stay on. So it just all kind of, you know, one thing led to the next. Yeah. I mean, I didn't even know, you know, I'd never heard of curating before this experience. Yeah. Yeah. So, do you all take art history classes or art classes or?
No, it's a separate class, art history is, but we do, like, every week we have a piece of art that we learn about, but not specifically art history.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are some things you've been learning about?
Well, he always does like a theme for 9 weeks or something. So this 9 weeks it's censorship. So it's a bunch of art that's been censored, like in the United States. Or
Do you remember any of them?
the one that I keep thinking of is Lu Bolin in China.
Oh.
It's like he's in all of them, and he's like basically invisible in them. They're pretty cool. And then what is the one?
Another one in China is Ai Weiwei.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we learned about him a couple weeks ago. How the government tries to stop his work and stuff.
Chris O'Feely, and that was in the United States with the poop and the
Yeah, that was at the Brooklyn Museum.
Yeah.
In what was that? It was probably about 15 years ago, I think. I wonder if I was here. Maybe it was 10 years ago. Yeah. Did you learn about Sally Mann at all, the photographer?
I don't know.
No? She lives in Virginia, but she's a nationally and internationally known photographer. And her work during the 1990s was particularly controversial. She uses her family in her photographs, including her children. And there's nudity, and they're just very candid.
I think I have seen those with her children, just like out on their farm.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
And there was a show last year at the museum that I organized. Yeah. Okay.
I just couldn't remember her name.
Yeah. Well, that would fit exactly into that theme.
So do you have to keep that kind of censorship in mind at the Virginia Museum, or like do you ever worry that things that you choose might be controversial? Or?
I do. Yeah. I mean, you have to think about that at any museum. You know, you're thinking about your audience, but the difference here is that we're a general fine arts museum, you know, meaning that we're not just contemporary and modern. So some people are coming to the museum just to see like Fabergé or Impressionist painting, and, you know, they're not making a decision that they specifically want to go see contemporary. So you have to keep that in mind. And this is also a more conservative region, let's say, than, you know, New York or something like that. And so you're keeping your audience in mind. And also we're a state-funded museum, so it's another layer. Yeah, I mean, you try not to have that stop you from doing things you think are important and that should be seen by your audience, but it just makes you think about how to, you know, frame it properly and kind of navigate it and help people, you know, actually engage with the material and not just have like a knee-jerk reaction to it. Yeah.
Well, since you do contemporary art, do you have any like advice for maybe like the artists in our class, like who want to be like artists as a job? Do you have any like advice?
Who want to be artists as their career? Sure, yeah. I mean, you have to, art over the past maybe 20, 30 years especially, has become much more institutionalized, meaning there's many more art schools, and so there's many more students who have MFAs, and it makes it much more competitive, and it raises the level. And so you really, if you're going to be a professional artist, a professional contemporary artist, you definitely have to, you have to be smart about where you're heading. I mean, you have to go to a good art school, or try to get into a good art school, and assume you're probably going to need to go to graduate school. I mean, I'm not saying everybody has to do that, but gone are the days, where you just kind of totally find your own path. There still are some people who do that. But if you want to have a full career and show in galleries and museums, you actually have to sort of be part of the whole system and figure out where galleries and museums are looking, and they're looking at smaller galleries and smaller museums, and those people are looking at people who come out of art schools, and it's a whole system. I mean, that's pretty much like anything. If you want to teach, at a high school or certainly a college level, you're going to have to go to graduate school. So, I mean, that's one thing. The other is just to look at a lot of art, to look at a lot of advanced contemporary art and try to understand it, because you want to be informed and just know what's going on, basically. I mean, saying all that, the one other thing I should say is, you're in high school, right? You don't have to be driven about your career. I mean, you can also experiment and play and try different things. But eventually, that's where you're going to need to be headed. Are you all interested in being artists or in that area?
I don't think so.
Uh-huh.
I like it, but I wouldn't do it myself as a
Uh-huh.
career.
What about you?
I'll probably continue making art. I don't know if it's going to be my career. My sister actually is in art school
Oh, great.
at BC.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
What area?
She is still doing like foundations in art.
So she's an undergraduate? Uh-huh.
Yeah, not
Yeah, lots of good art school. And had you ever, how had you even known about curating as a profession?
I knew that they were like museum curators, but I really I had no idea what they did at all until we were told the assignment. I guess I just was like, oh look, someone just hung the art up on the wall and no thought went into it, but it makes
So
sense.
is everybody in your class trying to find a curator to talk to in
No.
that art class?
Some people, because we have art 4 and 5 and they're combined into one class, and so all of the art 4s are just looking for artists,
I see.
and some of the art 5s are looking for curators.
Okay. Well, I always like to encourage people to think about being a curator. It's a great profession.
Yeah.
You do a lot of different things every day. I mean, that's how you started. I didn't really answer your question, what I do every day. Every day is really different. I never just do the same thing kind of over and over again. I'm always bouncing around between a lot of different things. Sometimes I'm trying to do really scholarly work. I'm reading and writing, and sometimes I'm just on the phone or looking up things on the computer, or answering mail or making phone calls. I travel a lot. Last week I went to Miami for this big contemporary art show, where we were looking at art to buy for the museum, and included a lot of socializing, which is fun, lots of parties, but it's work too. You're not just at the party like partying, you're basically at the party figuring out who you should talk to, so that you can network with them later on or something. So there's that whole part to it too. It's very interesting work, the scholarly and the social. So yeah, and you get to do history and art and all kinds of different things. I highly encourage it.
Is it a profession that's becoming more popular, or would you say that
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it is. The reason being that I think there are more arts organizations.
Mhm.
You know, you don't only curate at a big museum. There's like here in Richmond, the other curators who are here are at the University of Richmond.
Mhm.
There's several different art galleries. At VCU, there's the Anderson Gallery.
Yeah.
Um, there's curators for private collectors. There's curators not in in Richmond. Yeah, there's curators in Richmond for corporate collections.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I never sort of counted up how many curators are in Richmond, and there's like about 14 of us at the museum. So there's a couple dozen curators just around here, you know, working at big and small places and in different ways. And then there's curators at history museums,
Mhm.
and you know, the Historical Society, and the White House of the Confederacy, the Black History Museum, if that still is even running. So there's all kinds of different ways to be a curator.
And is the foundation usually still in art history, or?
It is if it's art.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at the History Society, they're historians,
Yeah.
except they're working with objects. I mean, that's the one big difference between, let's say, being an art historian and then going off to teach, and being an art historian and working in a museum. You know, you're working with objects as opposed to just kind of images of the objects and ideas. I mean, you get to work with ideas, but you're always kind of grounding them in the actual object, which I prefer.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions?
Is there a least favorite part of your
A
job?
least favorite part? That's a good question. Well, it is stressful, even though it's not boring. I mean, you wouldn't think it's stressful, I think, because people still think like a curator's sort of down there, you know, in the basement dusting ancient objects or something. But it's pretty stressful. It's you're multitasking, you know, at a rapid pace. I'll just let that go. It's not that I don't. I mean, I like multitasking, but like I said, sometimes it's a little much. I also the thing that's the best about my job is also in some ways the thing I like least. The thing that's best about working in a big museum is that there's so many people with so many areas of expertise that, you know, when you want to do something, you have like 24 people who are working with you who know all these things that you don't know. You know, you have editors, and you have you know, graphic designers and all kinds of people who work with you, exhibition designers. But at the same time, it means everything's really complicated, and it takes several years to do an exhibition, and you're always pushing and prodding people, and then the institutional priorities change and your project gets put in the back burner, and so there's all that kind of, you know, it's very complicated. You don't just think, oh, I'm gonna, you know, write a book about this and then go off and research it and write it. You know, you're working in a big institution, and you have to kind of play by all those rules. So it's a good and a bad. Yeah. Last questions? Those were good questions.
Do you make any art, or do you just?
I did.
Curate?
I
You
used
did?
to. That's how I started.
Okay.
That's what got me interested. When I went to college, I started making art, and then I just got more interested in art history. And I still, I haven't made anything in a while.
Mm-hmm.
I did pick it up again in grad school, and then stopped again, and hope I'll get back to it. But, you know, it would just be for my own